Ukraine can create its own nuclear weapons in weeks. President Zelensky issued an ultimatum to Donald Trump: either you take us to NATO or we create our own nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, Israel has eliminated Hezbollah's leader, Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. So, can Ukraine create its own nuclear weapons? And what does President Zelensky think about this idea? President Zelensky yesterday made an interesting statement about Ukraine's nuclear deterrence and the possibility of Ukraine creating its own nuclear deterrent, nuclear weapon. President Zelensky said that he told Donald Trump, either you take us in NATO to ensure Ukraine's security in the future, or we create our own nuclear weapons. President Zelensky also said about the Budapest Memorandum. So, can Ukraine create its own nuclear weapons, and does Ukraine have a legal right to do so? The answer is yes, because in 1994 Ukraine has signed a Budapest Memorandum. This agreement was signed by Ukraine, the United States, the United Kingdom and Russia. All parties of this agreement agreed to ensure Ukraine's security, to prevent any kind of attacks of Ukraine and to prevent usage of the nuclear weapons. However, the West failed to do this agreement actively. The West failed to help Ukraine to ensure its safety. That's why although Ukraine has refused the nuclear weapons, Ukraine has given up its nuclear arsenal, but the West failed to comply with this agreement, to help Ukraine to ensure its security. That's why Ukraine has a legal right to withdraw from this treaty and to create its own nuclear arsenal. Also, President Zelensky is right about the Ukrainian future. If NATO does not invite Ukraine to join this alliance, so how would either Ukraine can control its territory, how could either Ukraine ensure the safety of its own country? Other option is creating its own nuclear weapons, because it's the best way to deter Russia from attacking Ukraine again in the future. We are not talking about the creation of nuclear weapons today in Ukraine. President Zelensky said that he would not order creation of nuclear weapons in Ukraine. Ukraine is not working on this issue right now, but it is interesting topic to discuss about in the long-term perspective, because how Ukraine could be ensure its own security, how Ukraine can ensure that Russia would not attack Ukraine again in the future, instead of being a member of NATO or having its own nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, the West hesitates to invite Ukraine to join NATO. That's why Ukraine could create its own nuclear weapons to deter any kind of a future attack from Russian side, from the Russian Federation, because in case of any kind of a peaceful agreement or a ceasefire, Russia could launch another deadly attack on Ukraine in 5, 10, 15 years. So if Ukraine is a member of NATO, in that case Ukraine would not have the possibility, would not need a nuclear deterrent. But if Ukraine is not a member of NATO, how Ukraine can really ensure its own security? In the second case, only is having its own nuclear deterrent, its own nuclear arsenal. Also, German newspaper Bild reported that it would be not a big deal for Ukraine to create its own nuclear weapons, because Ukraine has enough material for this. Ukraine has a nuclear fuel, which is being used for Ukraine nuclear stations. Also, Ukraine has its own specialists, professionals who can do that. So Bild reported that if there is an order from President Zelensky to create nuclear weapons, the first Ukrainian nuclear warhead would be created in a few weeks. That's why President Zelensky is urging the West to invite Ukraine to join NATO. And if Ukraine is a member of NATO, nuclear weapons would not be needed in such case, President Zelensky said. He says that it's really important for us to being a member of NATO, and NATO's membership is a part of President Zelensky's victory plan. NATO's membership will prevent Ukraine from creating its own nuclear weapons and its own nuclear arsenal. However, in the meantime, Western leaders refused Ukraine to join NATO, Bloomberg reported, and the White House said that the United States would not allow Ukraine to join NATO right now because of the fear of escalation and because of the fear of the direct involvement in the war between the United States and Russia. That's why the West does not fully support President Zelensky's victory plan because of the fear of escalation. But let's hope that something will change after the US general election, maybe if Kamala Harris is elected as the US president or Donald Trump. If they change their minds, we could face a big major shift in the US policy regarding the support for Ukraine. As President Zelensky said in his victory plan, to win the war, Ukraine needs invitation to join NATO, to use this as a bargaining chip in the negotiations with Russia. Ukraine also needs authorization from the United States to use long-range weapons inside Russia to destroy Russia's strategic military installations deep inside Russia, to force Russia to negotiate with Ukraine in good faith to end the war. Also, Ukraine would need a non-nuclear deterrent inside Russia, also inside Ukraine. Ukraine would need NATO to deploy its own non-nuclear arsenal in Ukraine to ensure that Russia would not attack Ukraine again in the future. That's all the aspects, the main points of President Zelensky's victory plan. Also, Zelensky says that only official invitation for Ukraine to join NATO is important for Ukraine to survive a Russian invasion and to help Ukraine to defend itself against Russia's attack. Also, meanwhile, Donald Trump said that put the blame for the war in Ukraine on President Zelensky and US President Joe Biden. He said that Zelensky and Biden are both responsible for Russia's aggression against Ukraine, and it's really a ridiculous statement because maybe Trump forgot that Russia is aggressor. Russia was an aggressor when Vladimir Putin is the only person who decided to attack Ukraine, to invade our country. That's why Vladimir Putin is responsible for his illegal invasion of Ukraine, unprovoked and illegal aggression for Ukraine, and for violation of all international rules-based order and for violation of all international laws. That's why only Vladimir Putin should be punished for this aggression and should be blamed for this illegal act of war against Ukraine. Meanwhile, Israel has eliminated Yahya Sinwar, one of the leaders of Hamas, and it could put the war in the Middle East closer to its end, according to Kamala Harris. Israel has officially confirmed that it has the Yahya Sinwar, the leader of the Hamas and the main strategist of the October 7th attack, has been eliminated. Kamala Harris said that it could put the war in the Middle East closer to its end. President Biden said that it was a good day for Israel and the whole world, and there are the big expectations after this development because Benjamin Netanyahu can declare a victory in the war against Hamas because its leader has been eliminated, and also Israel can reach a peaceful settlement of the war between Israel and Hamas and ensure the release of hostages which are being held in Hamas illegally. That's why there are big expectations that this development could bring the war in the Middle East closer to its end. That's all for today. Stay with us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and glory to Ukraine!